I used to think things were way more important to me. And now that, in part forcing function is between the two of us, we have 5-bedroom houses each. So we have a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And we know that part of what I'm excited about moving to Chicago is like not having like gutters to clean and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what life used to be like when I lived in Toronto. And I had like 1.5 bedroom, 650 square foot apartment. So we had to be very intentional about what gets to come in here versus, and now it's like every week we have a few hours of like throw this away,
Purge.
Donate this, Facebook Marketplace this. There's an AI app that we have to make it easier to put stuff on Facebook Marketplace even.
Yeah.
But what it does more than anything else is like it helps curb a bunch of the stuff on the inset. Mm-hmm. Where next time we want to buy something, we're like, how soon is this going to end up in one of the 3 piles versus the keep pile? And maybe we just like avoid it altogether.
That's that Marie Kondo thing, right?
Yeah.
Like only having something in your home that brings you joy.
Just real delight. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also an exercise in self-awareness, I think.
Sure.
Because before, if you say, I'm going to get A and B, it's nice, it's convenient that you don't have to make the decision. But if you're forced to make A or B, there's an act of self-awareness that you're forced into where you have to be like, I don't know, let's just do best practice is not a great answer versus like, okay, what makes sense for our family? Well, I don't know, we got to get to know our family a little bit more. And then that process is way more fun.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, okay, this is what our values are. These are the things we want to lean into.
But also cool. It's a neat. I mean, it's an exploration, and because of, I don't want to say newness, but because you're a new dad, right? Like, it's exploring the family dynamic.
Yeah.
And like values and things that you cherish.
And I had to find my place.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
there.
At the
And
same
earn
time,
my way in there,
as you go.
Uh-huh.
That's fast. That's interesting.
Yeah, none of it was intentional, of course. It's
Yeah.
just kind of, you try and be intentional in the way you live, and there's like trends that come about from it, maybe. So.
Yeah. Ashok Sivanand, welcome to the
Wait,
Enthusiast.
Time out.
Did I say it wrong?
Yes.
Damn it! I always thought I said it right. I thought I was being really okay. So lay it on me the right way because
you got to show correctly. 0 changes.
Okay.
Sivanand is like if you think of the Irish woman Siobhan,
Yeah.
and then add END at the end,
But there's the SI is an SH.
is actually an SH. Yeah,
Sivanand.
there's a hidden H. Sivanand.
Sivanand.
Yeah.
And the accent is in the on.
Yeah, Sivanand.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's not hard.
All right.
No, pronunciation's big for me, and I've been saying it wrong the whole time, and so now I'm an asshole. So,
You know what? Good thing is we've been on a first name basis, so that part you've been nailing.
Sivanand.
Yeah, you got it.
Sivanand or Sivanand?
Sivanand.
Sivanand.
Yeah.
Okay. It's beautiful.
Thank you. It's Shiva is one of the 3 gods.
Yeah, one of the 3 gods, yeah.
And then I think Anand means happy, literally.
Okay.
So essentially Shivanand is someone that is in service of keeping Lord Shiva happy, I think. Which, like, as I've learned a little bit more about Hindu mythology, he feels like the archetype I might most like align with.
Gravitate to?
Yeah, he's kind of portrayed as a villain a little bit because there's like the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer, and he's the destroyer.
Yeah.
And we're very uncomfortable with like putting stuff on Facebook Marketplace or ending relationships with things or people and having boundaries.
People aren't comfortable with the end.
Yeah. And then as I get more comfortable with the concept and lean into it, I realize that the more you remember you're going to die, the more present you're going to be when you're alive. And that applies to so many other things. So I didn't choose the last name, but I found more meaning than the other 2, like of the big 3 of Hinduism.
Yeah. We're keeping all of this. Not a moment of that is getting cut out. So Ashok Sivanand. I got it.
You got it.
Okay. Welcome to the Enthusiastic Life Podcast.
Hey, I've been looking forward to it, man.
So, okay, but I before we keep going, I want to go back because something you talked about was something that stuck with me. Were you there for the Western Michigan speakers at Beavers?
Yes.
I loved what he said about we don't like no bad days.
I loved it. I went home and talked about, if there was one thing I talked about from that talk at home, it was about, hey, no bad days.
Yeah. I went back immediately to Kelly and I was like, no bad days. No bad days. Like even our worst day, it's not a bad day. Like in the realm of things. I just like, that was really powerful. I mean, it's a simple thing, but so powerful.
And I extrapolated that for his daughter to say it back to him when he dropped her off at school, he probably had to like be the boring dad for a decade.
Yeah.
where they probably hated it at first.
Yeah.
And then it became part of their mindset. And then they're saying it before he does.
Part of their vocabulary.
Exactly. So that's the long goal that I aspire to.
Yeah.
As a new dad of sorts.
It's like creating a new culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, for sure. And then is there one of the three that we look at?
No, we just talk to each other.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Wow, it's hard to introduce myself, I suppose. An international, national. I've lived in a number of places. Been in Detroit for about 10 years. It's been very good 10 years for me here. I got to start a business, grow it, sell it. I got to have a lot of personal change in my life here. Things like quitting smoking cigarettes, quitting drinking, all kind of happened for me when I was here in Detroit. And kind of grew up as a technologist, in part because my dad is a software engineer. So some dads play chess with their kids. My dad used to write code with my brothers and I. So I used to write code when I was 6. And then even though I don't know that my brain was necessarily wired for sitting at a computer all the time, this was just kind of a second language that I spoke since I was a kid. So various places in school, in the workplace, this kind of came in handy. I managed to get through engineering school, I think, because of that head start. And then once I hit the workplace, I spent a lot of time, working with marketing or going on ride-alongs with the sales guys, things that the other engineers hated doing. So they welcomed my presence. Yeah. But I felt like I was committing daylight robbery, getting paid to go on like sales calls and help the sales guys with understanding the product or articulating it, and then coming back and telling my team what the customer loved and what they didn't like. So I've kind of ended up building a business around that intersection between people who use the technology, people who are funding it and want a return on it, and the people who actually have to build the tech and what it's capable of. Mm-hmm. And it continues to be, even though we've sold that business, something that I'm really passionate about, that intersection.
That's cool. And do you mind, what do you recall of our origin story of how we met?
I think riding up the elevator here was awesome, because I think it's the first time in maybe 5 or 6 years I got to do that, because we used to have the office like on the other side of this wall, I think. So this
is the most unique origin story of anyone that we've had on our podcast. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, literally, I think it was my assistant Taylor and I, we came here, and then there was you and one of your colleagues, and I'm like, well, look at these two like frat boys that are going to be our neighbors here. And look at this, here we are.
Yeah.
That was in 2019 or 2018, I think. So
yeah, right before the pandemic. Yeah. I definitely met Taylor first before I met you, and then Michael met you, and then, yeah. And then we got to know each other more through most of my guests through the Detroit Athletic Club.
Yep, at the Detroit Athletic Club. I think it's an awesome place that, for folks who prioritize fitness and movement and competition, we end up just running into each other, and having community has been a lot easier, I think, for someone who's an outsider. Just kind of being around folks who believe in the same habits and prioritize things the same way.
So tell me about, you said you've been in Detroit about 10 years. Mm-hmm. So what was your journey to get here?
I was meant to be here for 6 months. I was working at a Silicon Valley company called Pivotal.
Okay.
And they were, in retrospect, about 1.5 years before they went public. We didn't necessarily know that for sure. People at my level definitely didn't. But we were on this kind of global expansion phase. And there were offices being opened in Detroit, Paris, Sydney, and Singapore.
Okay.
And I had this unique kind of blend of skills that made me really great for opening new offices. So there's a little bit of the technology side, a little bit of the sales side, a little bit of the human side, being able to build a team. I had done this at a previous startup in Europe before as well. So I was sort of someone that leadership had an eye on in terms of, hey, like, we need to deploy this guy to help us open one of these offices. And you heard the list of cities. Detroit's not necessarily in the, it doesn't have the same branding as Sydney, Paris, and Singapore. But I lived downtown Toronto at the time. And so for me, I think I was always really curious about a life outside of this very fast-paced, metropolitan, downtown kind of lifestyle. And full disclosure, I got into a bunch of bad habits as someone who moved to Canada as an international student when I was 17. And, I kind of figured out how to grow up on my own and kept getting paid more than I could spend. And it felt like a refuge for some of those bad habits as well, in a little bit of a culture shock moving to the Midwest, believe it or not, compared to the other places where I'm like, I feel like, it's different languages and different kind of food there, but you're going to get into all the same things and hang out with the same characters. But moving to Detroit, you're going to get to know a different kind of person. And of course, there's also a bunch of stuff about the auto industry that I grew up just like many boys, maybe just loving cars and getting to be closer to it. I worked along the way as a forklift driver in manufacturing plants. I worked at a GM and Suzuki plant. So working in the auto industry, I was never afraid of the hard hats and steel toe boots and all of that stuff compared to wanting to work on Wall Street or Bay Street in Toronto or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a combination of things where, and they agreed to pay me more to move to Detroit than the other two. So
is that like hazard pay?
That, you could call it something along those lines where there were a lot more hand raisers for the other ones, and money is, a pretty quick and decisive incentivizer, I suppose. But I had a lot more reasons than I necessarily was able to articulate at the time.
Yeah.
And I felt like, hey, you know what? I can do 6 months here.
Sure.
It's going to be super fun because we were working specifically with helping Ford build an in-house innovation lab, a software team that worked a lot closer to Silicon Valley software teams. We had it an arm's length away in Ann Arbor, not in their mothership in Dearborn, very intentionally, not just for the access to talent from U of M, but also because we're trying to bring completely new mindset culture than what this 100-year-old auto company had. And so keeping it far enough away made sure that anyone who drove all the way from Dearborn to Ann Arbor were folks who really wanted to support us.
Yeah.
Compared to, I think, as we started to post-COVID and stuff, notice that the corporate antibodies, I guess, who want to keep things a certain way, make it hard to do change. And there's an importance to have both, I think, for a company that big. So nevertheless, that was also a very exciting thing to do. I was featured in like CIO magazine alongside the CIO of Ford and stuff. So those were the combination. And I think why am I still here 10 years later was like very different reasons. I think when I first moved here, funnily, a lot of the folks who knew me before I moved here said this thing. And it was some version of this thing that at least 5 or 6 people said, where they're like, whoa, single guy moving from downtown Toronto. Don't live in Dearborn. You're going to be bored here. This is very family. And then they'd all do this thing where they lean in and be like, and of course, don't live in Detroit. You know what? You should live in Royal Oak. And I didn't know any better. And corporate housing put me up in a loft in Royal Oak, and it was really pretty and everything. But it was exactly what you'd expect from a downtown of a suburb in the Midwest. So, I remember the first day thinking like, okay, you got 5 months and 29 days left. But I started coming downtown Detroit initially for the restaurants, and then over time found this like tech community of entrepreneurs.
What year was that you first came to Detroit?
2016.
Okay.
So, the first wave of making downtown more livable, maybe for lack of a better term, had already kind of happened. The people who worked in corporate suburb of Metro Detroit didn't necessarily know that yet, but it certainly was for anyone who came downtown and gave it a try.
Well, people were still scared of Detroit.
Yeah.
In the suburbs.
Exactly. And when I told people, even back then, like my first or second week here, I would, instead of going straight back to Royal Oak, go hit up like restaurants like Republic and stuff, RIP.
Oh, yeah. That place was
which
great.
Was like just down the street here, right? And I remember thinking like, hey, this is like pretty sweet. And I'd go and tell people at the office the next day, and they're like, whoa, you did what? Like, you're not from here, man. Are you sure? And it was very quickly, I realized that I just wanted to live down here. I had the privilege and luck of corporate housing where I could make this magical phone call to someone in a headquarters somewhere. And they're like, yep, 48226, I'll find a place. Consider this your 2-week notice. So get all your stuff back.
Oh, so like even within that 6-month period, you were able to say, I want to go downtown.
Yeah. I think I moved here August, and before Christmas, I was in the, right across from the now Shinola Hotel in the Lofts of Merchant Row here.
Yeah.
And I remember I could open this window all the way. And this is before the queue line, but they were like ironing out some of the last phases of launching the queue line. I'd be sitting out there. I used to smoke cigarettes back then, and I would just be sitting on the like ledge there, like I was like Sarah Jessica Parker from Sex and the City or something.
It's very
like,
cinematic.
What is this lifestyle you have here that you could like I could never afford that lifestyle in Toronto, for example, right? To be that close to like the center of the city, have such a big place to myself and everything else. So. Between the community of entrepreneurs and tech folks that I met here and a little bit of that other jolt in terms of the lifestyle I could have. That's where I decided to make the family decision to quit that job, even though I knew this company was going public soon and everything else. And then bet on myself, but also give myself a deeper reason to stay in Detroit by starting a business.
So tell me about where the idea for Integral came from and how you decided to make that leap.
Yeah, I suppose to some extent, going into business was always something I in retrospect, I feel like I was sort of wired for. Like I was the guy in college importing textbooks from developing nations that cost $30 and then like selling it to my classmates instead of the like glossy hardbound versions that were available at the bookstore for 10 times the price. Right. So selling those for $100 had a fair amount of margin and customer satisfaction all kind of baked in. Sure. And I'm still not, I've intentionally not looked up the legalities of where that falls apart.
It's a gray area.
Exactly. But for Integral specifically, I think what I realized was, number one, there's something about working in services and working directly with the people that we collaborate with on the other side that I was just wired for. Number two, this company that I was at, Pivotal, had this really unique mindset around organizing talent to build really delightful product. And they were moving out of this space. They were moving out of the services space because they had a platform they had developed. And if you're going IPO, you don't want services revenue, you want platform revenue.
Right.
And they'd kind of gotten out of this phase where the platform was starting to stand on its own 2 feet. And the services folks went from being the golden children who were bringing in all the cash to put towards this, bringing in the new fancy customers, to very quickly went from golden child to like stepchild.
Interesting.
Because this revenue was mostly risk and folks on Wall Street didn't care about it the same way.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a natural evolution where companies have this new focus, and we had this 12-month to IPO that was announced internally, that little things started to upset customers, started to upset the talent that was servicing the customers. And you start to see like, hey, what the customer wants and what I want to do and what the current service provider wants to do are all kind of very misaligned.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity there. And
then
I still don't know.
There was a vacuum that was being created.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. And then the part that I'm still not sure how I did this was I created a 3-way handshake between myself, the then CIO of Ford, and then the then president of Pivotal, where everyone was good with my kind of starting something as a spinoff. Where for Pivotal, they had someone who would be dedicated to these customers. We'd still protect their platform interests. For Ford, they had someone who didn't have to phone home to Silicon Valley anymore and wanted to build a team locally. And I think 2016 Detroit, a lot of folks I was just given a few extra points because I wanted to double down on the city of Detroit as a technologist, where most people were either leaving or they were only coming here to build things in manufacturing versus build a tech company.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a little bit of sort of grease to lubricate this complicated situation that allowed me to start it. And then, the rest is sort of history from there.
That's cool. So having a Silicon Valley background, what did you learn from that you brought to Integral and to Detroit?
Yeah,
because it's not like a lot of Silicon Valley is coming here, right? I mean, there is, but but I'm curious. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a few things that I took away, and we can talk about them individually. There's the good and bad of all of it, right? And I feel like we can maybe have a better story than being pro Silicon Valley or anti Silicon Valley, and instead, what can we learn?
Yeah.
But what can we also preserve what's our own and not necessarily do what they're doing and do it our own way. And I think there's a lot about culture and ways in which we can be very intentional about engaging our talent. I think there's an operating model. Something about Silicon Valley, I think, is really breaking things down to first principles of how the current systems exist, and then trying to solve the problem from the ground up versus optimizing on the surface. The best example that comes to me is like, there's a lot of people building, the NBA 2K or different sports video games. There's armies of folks that are constantly working on making it more lifelike, where LeBron James on the game walks more and more like LeBron James. And that takes armies and armies of folks in that industry. Meanwhile, like in parallel, someone else invented fantasy sports where you didn't have to worry about any of these custom animations. You didn't need armies of people. You just needed a database of how did these different players do and another database of what's your team of those players versus mine. And that's worth way more now.
Well, and when you think about, especially in Detroit, where you have so many legacy industries, and it's like every year, all they're doing is just tuning and optimizing.
Adjusting for inflation.
Right.
In innovation. Yeah, totally. Right. And I think, the incentive systems are so different for someone who's building a new electric vehicle startup, or even going back to the story that's more public now about when Elon took over Tesla and what he was trying to prove, versus the companies who, stood to lose that market share, that were really adjusting for just churning out more and more. Like, for example, I think this may have changed now, but the chief engineer, like the mini CEO of the Chevy Silverado, the longest time was not compensated based on how many Chevy Silverados were sold. They were compensated for getting it done on time and on budget. And that's a signal from a leadership standpoint based on that incentive that was provided around, hey, what is this person allowed to change? And what does this person have to not screw up? And it's very different when you say, hey, the more Silverados we sell, that's when you get really paid.
Right.
And then you go back and you start to ask not questions about how do I improve the Silverado, but why do people buy a Silverado in the first place? Why do they buy a truck? Why do they buy a car?
Yeah.
And you start to solve problems from a more first principle level by asking more whys, versus like, hey, I'm inheriting the last Silverado playbook and I just have to not screw this up and I get paid. It's a very different signal, I think, that one way that we would think about it is the Silverado example. They're optimized for predictability.
You know what you're going to get.
You know what you're going to get. Things aren't going to change that much. So you better not change things too much, because I've got dealers, I got all of this tier of suppliers, everyone kind of basically working off the same spreadsheet. Versus when you optimize for uncertainty as opposed to predictability, you're looking at things very different of how can I change things and what are the core assumptions in my change? Are those right or wrong? I can find these right and wrongs out much earlier than having to go build a new pickup truck.
Yeah.
Versus the ones that I need to build a pickup truck to realize whether I was right or wrong on. And so I think bringing that different mindset is probably out of all the things that I learned, the biggest one, because you start changing your operating model depending on which one you're leaning in towards.
So there's something you said a couple of times that not everyone might know what it means, which is first principle.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what does that mean?
Yeah, and I think maybe there's an example that we can come up with, right? If you start if we're talking business and you're trying to revolutionize a part of the business, working as consultants, it was almost in our nature to do this because we had to understand our client's business very quickly, and thereby had to figure out what questions allowed us to disproportionately quickly act like we were someone on their team versus consistently feeling like someone who was an outsider. And I think the easiest way to do it usually is something that I learned from working in Japanese manufacturing. It's a 5 whys exercise. And it's usually used for root cause analysis. When something goes wrong, go ask why 5 times and you understand the root cause of the problem. And this 5 whys can be applied to why things are going well too. If you think about your business and like, hey, why do these customers come to us? What is their best alternative? What is an alternative at all? And then you understand the next layer of like, okay, they're worried about these risks and that's why they feel like they need insurance.
Yeah.
Where does this worry come from and where do these risks come from? Those are 2 kind of second layer questions. And then you ultimately come down to sort of things that are more or less a common language to be able to understand.
Yeah.
In business, something that was really helpful for me to not overcomplicate things was think about the 3 shoeboxes of money. Like there's money coming in, there's money going out, and then there's money for what's left over. And if everything boils down to sort of your revenue, your costs, and then your profit, and we're able to sort of tie things back to where optimizations should be had, which problems are worth solving, what level of investment to put in terms of trying to solve something based on just this very basic thing. So I think a lot of folks kind of assume that there were really smart people before us that have put the systems in place that we currently all abide by. And I have a different opinion that those folks were doing the best they could.
Right.
But a lot of it was arbitrary. And there's a lot of stuff that someone could have just had a bad day or didn't sleep well and wrote down somewhere and now has become law, or at least assumed law, where, you know, a lot of companies kind of inherit it from, like I inherited a bunch of stuff when we spun out from Pivotal.
Sure.
And a lot of stuff was useful and a lot of stuff was assumption that it was arbitrary, and I was able to chip away at and realize, oh, this is way better if we did it a different way.
It's kind of like that childlike wonder thing
100%.
of just why,
Yep. It's one of the most annoying questions.
but
if
also
you're
one
a
of the most
parent,
powerful, right?
100%. And I think I was a little lucky. I was the kid, to give you a couple of examples of it. Curiosity is so popular now. And my brothers will laugh about how I was always curious because, number one, I shaved my eyebrows off because I was too young to shave a beard, but I really wanted to shave.
How old were you?
I must have been like 10.
Okay.
And my mom had to like draw on, like with her like
Come on.
eyebrow pencil
Yeah.
or whatever for mascara. Like I went to school for a few days with like drawn on eyebrows. Another morning, my parents woke up to the fire extinguisher. I wanted to know what it felt like to squeeze the fire extinguisher.
Who
right?
doesn't?
I found out.
And
And I tried to clean it up like no one would know. Obviously, everyone knew.
but was it as satisfying as you wanted it to be?
It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
That's fair.
So there was this innate level of like, not just curiosity, but wanting to find out for myself and not take someone's word for it of what it feels like to fire a fire extinguisher
Yeah.
or shave, which I think helped a lot with the first principles thing. But I don't think it's that hard to learn because we taught a bunch of people at Integral, I think, that way too, that didn't necessarily get exposed to that before.
Yeah.
And then by virtue of that, taught a bunch of our clients as well.
That's cool. So, so you start Integral, you grow it, and then you sell it. When you started Integral, you had a vision for the company.
Mm-hmm.
When you sold it, do you feel like you achieved that vision? How, like when you think about, you know, they say like a plane taking off for New York, if it changes half a degree, 1 degree, all of a sudden it's in, you know, who knows where.
Uh-huh.
How was that process from starting to when you sold it relative to the vision that you had for the business?
You know, it depends on what lens we're looking at the vision.
Okay.
In some ways, it changed dramatically. In other ways, I feel like whatever I'm working on next is going to continue working on that vision. You know, I think we certainly wanted to impact the way software was built and continue doing the work that I'd gotten to do previously, because I felt like we were only scratching at the surface, especially when you look at more non-technical companies and how they continue to build software like a very archaic way, compared to something that was just way more fun to do. And you know that with your team too, when the teams had more fun building something, chances are that fun seeps into whoever is consuming that, whether it's an event or a product or whatever, and that delight kind of carries through.
Yeah.
And there was like a relatively simple but hard way to kind of get to that. And that was something I wanted to do, and got to some extent. I think one of the other things that I realized along the way is that, you know, we set this out. We did EOS, and so they say have a 10-year target. In our 10-year target, it said like, we will only work on things that we would invest in ourselves, and we invest in everything we work on. And we need to earn our way to have enough cash flow and clout and other things like that where we can do that. And I think we got to do a lot of both. And part of what we ended up hitting a little bit of an impasse was when you work with really, really big companies, which it wasn't intentional maybe, but Ford was our first client, which was kind of awesome. And that really helped with getting other really big blue chip clients like Honda and Airstream and Bosch. And then we started to work with more of the auto finance companies like Ford Credit and stuff. And that helped us get into like Rocket Mortgage and other lending institutions, all really, really big and looked awesome on the website. When it came down to changing the way they worked, at some point, I think the denial and the humility hit an impasse where I realized like, hey, like the chances of you changing the way a 200,000 person company works with a 55 person team is like very improbable. Compared to maybe you have a 50-person company and you work with a 200-person company, you might be able to make a significant change that has a significant impact on the owner and the shareholders or whoever of that company too.
Yeah.
Compared to a lot of the things we'd be doing at the big companies where we felt like were huge wins, like 7-8-figure changes to the bottom line that no one cared about.
Interesting.
Right? So I think there was this part of it. The biggest lesson I think was that my ego was really fueled by these big brand names that we were able to convince to work with and have really good partnerships with. But having to also realize that they want you for something very different than you really want to do. And it's more important for me to work with people that want that sort of shared influence versus someone that wanted to sort of tell us what to do and be done the right way.
Yeah.
Which now I think it's going to be pretty unlikely that whatever I'm doing next is going to be working with really big companies. If it's around transformation, it's probably being a little bit more realistic and humble around like, hey, how big can you wrap your arms around that you feel like you can really bring change to an organization? And right now I think it's probably like 200 to 500 employees or fewer.
Sure.
And not caring about the customer's size as much as how much change we can bring them as the fuel. And that's something that I don't think I could have gone back in time. Like the version of me that started the business would not be convinced of that as much as like I've had to learn it along the way.
That makes sense. So, so you build a business, you sell the business. What is life like post-transaction? I feel like this is something that business owners don't talk about, right? Like they might build a business and they might be building a lifestyle business or they might be building something they want to sell or take public or what have you. But I feel like people don't talk about the after. Mm-hmm. What's that been like?
I think in like what I've realized the causation around this, because I've gotten to hang out with a lot other like what are known as post-exit founders. And this is a common theme of conversation around maybe the identity loss. We thought we were way more important. Like when I did the exit transaction, I was on the hook for answering way more phone calls that actually came in. And it's silly to think about how much time we thought we would need and everything. And then the calls didn't come in. And at the negotiating table, I was trying to reduce the number of calls. But on the other side, there was an identity loss where I was looking at like, hey, I thought I was more important and the phone's not ringing. How are they able to, so there was some level of realizing that all systems are able to find ways to carry on.
Interesting.
And sometimes the adaption is easier than the friction of having to make a phone call and the vulnerability of saying, I don't know how to do something and everything else. So that identity loss was really hard for me of not being asked questions and not being needed for stuff.
Yeah.
I think another piece probably is, you're essentially living off your savings, which was always a negative thing before. Like I was always like, oh man, otherwise I'll have to live off my savings. And then here, like that's kind of the plan.
Yeah.
And that's still like something that, I think forces a lot of self-awareness or self-exploration sometimes.
Sure.
But we're not prepared. I think if I had to go back in time, I'd want to go back to like when I was selling textbooks and think about the revenue as like how much of this can be like making more money for you passively versus like the hard dollars that were coming in my pocket. And it was in an early job. I don't know. Have you heard of a book called The Wealthy Barber?
No, I have not.
It's like almost mandatory reading. I feel like it should be in the show notes, certainly of the episode.
Okay.
It's about, it's one of those kind of educational books that's presented as fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fable.
It's a fable. Yeah. And,
which I love books that have a message that way. Easy to read and consume. They
exactly.
Yeah.
Really big font and everything too.
Pictures?
Like really leaning in. Maybe they should have like the comic book version.
Right.
But it's about this barber who's really wealthy. And this kid comes home from college or his first job or something. And he's like asking his dad how to like do money stuff. And the dad's like, I don't know. I think you should go talk to the barber though. Cause he's like the wealthy barber.
Yeah.
And I learned things like pay yourself first is from the book, which is, I would even back then take like $200-300 and put it straight into my savings account And back then there was a bank in Canada called ING Direct, now known
Oh yeah,
as Tangerine.
They back in the day they like the best interest rate was like ING Direct.
That's why, And they had a type of bank account that I couldn't pull money from.
Yeah, you had to wait. It was like a 5-day hold up or something, so you couldn't. Yeah, I remember that.
I had to go into the branch for mine.
Yeah.
So most of the impulse purchases, like by the time you walk down the street in the cold in Toronto, like the neocortex takes back over, and you're like, hey, maybe I don't need this new motorcycle right now, and then you just go back and you have like more savings going for you, right? And then every time I got a raise, I would just take how much ever that increase was and put it straight into this bank account. So when it came to like starting a business, for example, like there was this little nest egg already in play. So it's a bunch of similar kind of things. It talks about insurance, which types of insurance make sense, for which circumstances and everything else. And I think a lot of Canadians read this when they were in like early high school.
Okay.
And one of my bosses in the early jobs realized that I had not read it just based on like cluing in on my lifestyle. And he was like, hey, I got a book for you to read. It's not a business book this time. And I think it's one of the kindest things anyone's ever done, because he had to also be like...
A gift.
It's a gift, and he leaned into the friction of like, hey, I'm maybe overstepping my role as a manager here, but I notice your lifestyle here, and I wanted to give you another perspective.
That's real care and compassion.
It really is. It took me a while to take it that way as the like rebellious kid, but in retrospect, it's one of the kindest things anyone's done.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you have a big event coming up soon.
A few.
So, but you've had some big life changes, right? With you're getting married.
I'm engaged, getting married at the end of January.
So how's that going?
You know, it started out as we thought we were going to do a party in the summer. And then the other change that we're experiencing is that we're moving as a family to Chicago in June. And then we did a staycation. So this is, in terms of trying to be intentional at home, I realized that we didn't have family values explicitly stated. And now my fiance has an 11-year-old son. His dad has passed away. And so I'm like the main male character in his life, right? And so I want to know that I'm parenting in a way that she would agree with, or when she might disagree, so that I know that, hey, I'm going off piste here, and I'm going to have to be very defensible. And since we didn't have that, I said, hey, we've got a bunch of stuff coming up, a wedding, a move. I'm going to more officially be taking over.
Stressful life events.
Yeah. And they don't have to be stressful, I think, if we can try and look around the corner and have some communication. So we booked a night at the Shinola. We may or may not have consumed some psychedelics, which I'm happy to also get into. And then I came in with like this set of prompts of questions and facilitation to arrive at, I think, some insights for us. And then she brought paints, like little canvases and watercolors for us to kind of get into it. And so we painted a bit, and then I started, I wanted to get some family values going. Part of it was I was really curious about this person I was going to marry.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know what she wanted for herself, maybe 3 years out, what she wanted for her son. Questions she may not have asked herself. And something like, really deep meditation, maybe psychedelics, can really help sort of peel away the ego closer to the truth, I believe. And I'd experienced this in a more clinical setting before, so I felt very comfortable doing it in a hotel environment this time. And so the next day, we took a bunch of this stuff and borrowed from the write drunk, edit sober, I think is the adage. And we were sitting here at Desert Oasis, and like making sense of these like recordings and photographs of sticky notes and all this stuff. As an aside, we got a text from Shinola Hotel saying we forgot something. And I thought, I forgot drugs at the hotel. I'm going to be in trouble. And it turns out they have this really cool app where you can click through where, you can see the note from housekeeping who thought that we left behind children's paintings, even though there were no children.
No children present.
There. And anyway, you asked about the wedding. And one of the things that came up in this moment of like very vulnerable honesty was I said, babe, we're moving child to a new city. And we're also thinking about having like this big wedding celebration the same summer. I haven't moved with a family and I've never been married, but those feel like they're going to compromise both of those experiences. We try to double them on. And in that moment, and I was not sure how to bring this up.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't even sure how I felt about it, but it just felt like a very pressing dissonance that I wanted to kind of surface. And she was just, you could see the relief just like pouring out of her, saying, thank God, I didn't know how to bring this up to you either. But it does feel like a lot. The move has to happen. Why don't we get married in 2027 and just go to the courthouse, like sooner than later?
Yeah.
And so January 30th was meant to be the courthouse celebration, which now like there's going to be 70 people at somehow. And we had to be very intentional and wanted to keep it small and everything. But now I don't know if we'll do anything in 2027 because we've like most of what we want. We're going to get out of this small, like very intimate, intentional celebration. So we're excited.
But that you know, that level of communication is so important, right? I mean, when my wife and I went, before we got married, we were seeing a therapist together. And one of the things that that she gave us was tools on how to communicate and how to listen and how to hear each other. Not just hear, but intentionally, actively listen.
Yeah.
And one of the exercises she gave us when we got engaged, which is unsolicited advice that I give to a lot of people, is we sat down and we wrote down our how we envisioned our wedding, what it would look like. And then we changed papers and we read each other's papers. And we found out the things that we had strong feelings about, the things that we had in common, and the things that we didn't care about. And all of a sudden we were able to craft that into one thing that fit for both of us. It was our wedding. Right?
I love that.
And it was awesome. It was really, and it was fun. Like it was fun to go have coffee and bagels and talk about what we wanted it to look like.
And doing it well before the stress is on allows you to be a little bit more like, I don't know, divergent or chill in your thinking, which means you could be more honest and not feel constrained. We almost did the exact same thing. And then as these decisions came up, we had a guiding light of like, hey, what about this? What about that? And we know like we've already made a list of like, if it's someone you want to invite, we've got 4 questions. And if those 4 questions are yes or no, then we know whether we truly want them there. Or there's a ton of folks that we would love to have at a party or, you know, but we wanted to be a little bit more intentional about this one and had like maybe 1 or 2 more questions. And it made it so much easier later about any debates being settled there.
Can I share something that I've learned? So every year at our anniversary, we look through our photo album. So we have a photo album from the wedding. We also have a book of Polaroids that people took. And then we have a book of handwritten notes that people gave us. And the handwritten notes were for us to read on our first anniversary, but we read them. So we might go out to dinner for anniversary and we come back and we look through all of this stuff. And something that jumped out to me was, I'm starting to get emotional thinking about it, is being like, there were people that were at the wedding that were like, oh, they probably like, they could have not been there, right? Like they weren't as meaningful at the time, you know, in our 28, 29, 30-year-old selves, they were very important, and that's no offense. It's not like meant to offend those people, but there's also people that weren't there that should have been there. And it's looking back of like, okay, if you come back in 15 years and you look back at your photos, are the people there the ones, and is there anyone that you're missing that you're like, I don't want to look back 15 years and not have them be present for that moment? Yeah.
I love that. And it's making it so much more authentic for yourself, presumably. And I love I'm going to steal the anniversary thing because I didn't grow up having journals. But going back and reading books that I read when I was a kid or looking at photos gives me like a reflection of the state of mind I was in there, even though I didn't explicitly write it out. And I feel like this might be a great exercise.
And memories are inherently flawed. Like our memories are wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Our brains are so silly.
Yeah. And so like most of the things I find that we remember from before are things that we have photos or videos of. And so to have that to look back on. But what was particularly cool is having the pictures that other people took, because, you know, our photographer only took certain photos. But when everyone else was taking something that was intentional for us to have, was pretty cool.
Awesome. Did no one like sneak in like cheeky photos?
Oh yeah, for sure. And like some of the handwritten notes were great. Like some of our friends are all messed up. Like they drank too much, but like one of our favorite ones that we read every year was like, I have had 10 crab cakes and they are delish. Because the crab cakes were delicious.
Yeah,
They really
so
were.
we look at each other like, hey, remember the decision behind the crab cakes? We gotta redo that ethos.
Well, it always makes us remember a memory where we had it actually at a club in DC when we lived there, and Kelly didn't really get a chance to eat, and so we were staying in a hotel room there overnight, and we went up. The people who organized it put together a plate of all of the food so that we could have something, and we had told them that she at the time didn't drink champagne, and so they had the beer that we liked on ice, and they had set aside everything so that we could have it for ourselves. And just one of those,
And how did that come about? I'm curious.
it was just the event planner from the club just did it for us, didn't even ask. Like he just took that's just good hospitality and caring for others.
And I think, that I love this story for many reasons. And I think we've talked about really great products, not just do the thing and are useful, but they also have an emotional impact, a moment of delight. And usually that requires exceeding expectations in some capacity. And in order for you to exceed someone's expectations, but in a way that's relevant to them, that requires a lot of getting to know the person.
Yeah, and they sat down and they got to know us, right? There's a great book. Have you read Unreasonable Hospitality?
Yeah.
I've seen Will Guidara speak once at an event, and then he actually joined us for a Zoom call to talk about it. We read it as a book club.
Awesome.
That's a great book. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think more and more so, it's a book that I find myself recommending to small, medium business owners that I spend a lot more time with now than before.
Yeah.
Because there is this want for a lot of folks to go beyond being customer service companies and into hospitality companies. And it's something that's very easily lost, especially if you're trying to do a transformation and a change within your workforce. Those are terms that are easily misinterpretable.
Yeah.
And the book, I think, is a great start to come up with a checklist of 5 or 6 things of what does this mean at my HVAC plumbing company to be more hospitable.
What are the ways in which we touch our clients that can be changed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the chances are, she was not the first bride that didn't get a chance to eat, but was bummed that she didn't get to taste the food that she spent so much time deciding on. And so hopefully it took this guy only 2 or 3 tries before he realized, hey, you know what? I can make her a plate. And it
was a little bit of everything.
From a bunch of sad faces of feedback of previous weddings that he planned, and realized this is real low-hanging fruit. And I feel like a lot of us have a lot of that around if we start looking around and being curious.
Profound impact that we're still talking about 18 years later.
Exactly.
So real quick before we wrap up, you have your podcast. Can you tell me a little bit about it and what you guys talk about? I love the idea of nerding out on topics. It's something that's one of my passions of going down rabbit holes. But tell me a little bit about the Convergence Podcast.
It started out with an integral, very specifically being around fostering engaged teams who build delightful technical products. And then since then, it's sort of zoomed out a little bit more around, hey, what goes into fostering engaged teams? So culture, employee engagement, even going back to if you're the founder or an entrepreneur, what is the ethos and purpose that gets you fired up in the first place? And how can we bring more and more of that into work so that folks know what you stand for? And a lot of stories, we usually have guests on from notable companies like Shopify and other companies who are at the leading edge of this stuff, that can come talk about how they do it. And we focus a lot on stories versus facts, because I feel like, especially today in the age of AI, the facts are really available, but it's the stories that humans are wired to be inspired from. Even if it's inspired to not do something and say like, hey, now that I've heard your story, I know that that's not us, but I know that I may use that somewhere else. Yeah. Another thing is operating model. I feel like there's a lot more data that's available in our businesses than we think is available. And it's a lot easier to sift through and parse through this data to make something really useful, whether it's having a tremendous impact through a new system or process in your company that your employees are delighted by. Like this, I don't know your wedding planner, but I'm a big fan. Might be a little late for me to hire them now, but they probably have a checklist that helped them make sure that, hey, did someone get the food before everyone else got to it, so that the bride and groom have some. And systematizing it in a way that people understand why the system is, when you should kill the system. So there's a lot that I've gotten to learn about operating model that I think a lot of non-technical businesses haven't necessarily had the exposure to. Another thing is tech. You know, where should we use it? Where should we, more importantly, not use it? We've all got limited budget, but also focus, energy, especially emotional energy, and being intentional about where we prioritize that and how to get to those priorities. Another set of stories that we tend to get to. And then finally, it's around experimentation. Sometimes it feels like, hey, this is this really big thing that a big company was able to do because they had crazy amounts of budgets, and we would never be able to do that to find out if that's for us. But there's actually a lot of ways. You've probably heard of A/B testing in the tech world, but that's just less than 5% of ways to learn a lot by doing very little, to inform whether you want to spend more time and double down on something or avoid it altogether. So those are kind of the 4 topics that we tend to talk about on Convergence. So I've been having a lot of fun doing it, and it leads to folks reaching out afterwards and seeing how we can solve it at their businesses.
Nice.
And then it gives me something to do as kind of as a solo artist now compared to someone who's running a business in terms of still getting to help people out there.
Awesome. So last question, ask everyone. What's something that's bringing you joy right now?
The broad version is probably like vulnerable self-exploration, which sounds like really goofy, but it's just doing things that I think the 14-year-old version of myself, or even the 6-year-old version of myself, thought was normal, like that childlike wonder. And then at some point, we kind of cake over assumptions about who we are meant to be, and then trying to unpeel that. So I did a piano recital. It was 10-year-olds around, and I was the only one. I did stand-up comedy recently. I'm coming up hot off of like a cooking boot camp with my 2 brothers.
I saw that. That was,
who are much better chefs than I am. So just doing things like this where I know I'm going to there's a chance that I'm going to look silly or embarrass myself. But look at the difference between things that are dangerous versus things that feel scary.
Right.
And doing the scary things. And some of it, I don't know if I'll do again, but other things I kind of, if not anything else, feel a little bit more confident to do goofy things, but learn a bunch along the way. And I think it's really helpful for me in, taking on this new role as a husband, taking on this new role as a stepdad, of how to help both of them with learning who they are. And I feel like if there's one thing I want to look back at and feel proud of, it's that I helped them both learn who they are in a really fun, versus like a traumatic way to get there, in a fun, safe way, where they felt the discomfort, but at the end of the day, got to learn more about who they are and what change they want to make. And so, it's a little bit of a combination of all those things that I've gotten to do over the last couple of years. It's been super fun.
Cool. Can't think of a better way to end it than that. So thank you so much for being here and joining us.
Hey, this has been super fun, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Ashok for joining us on this episode of The Enthusiastic Life. And thank you all for being here and being a part of the Enthusiastic Life community. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing us with a friend. Give us a like, comment, rating. We'd love to spread the word of the podcast and more people to share some of the joy and enthusiasm and send some positive vibes out to the world. So thank you again for being here. Thank you to Ryan Dewan, my producer, and hope you all have an outstanding day and week and month wherever you are. Take care. We'll see you next time.